welcome. In the debate, Daniel Phil, the author of the film Jochen. The film is a story of a man who has never worked in his life, or who hasn't been employed, better to say, in his world, became rich and poor and went through many adventures, where one of the, let's say, poles of his life was, let's say, seeking for freedom out of, but partly within the movement of, let's say, hippies, but without any connections to political ideas. On the other hand, then he was following the path of drug business, and nowadays lives in a private place somewhere in Italy. Maybe it would be good to start maybe with really kind of personal questions for you. How did you find him, and how did you convince him to talk? Because some of his memories and witnesses, one can even think, is it not even still possible to connect it with police investigation, etc., when he openly speaks about it? If you could reveal these kind of background initial ideas.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me on your wonderful festival and for the very good organization, even in these weird, crazy times. So to your question, I met Jochen about 6 years ago in the Tuscany, because a friend of mine, he worked there part-time as a farmer. He helped people harvesting olives, especially. And that's when he met Jochen and decided to work with him, to help him with his olive yard, which he sold a few years ago because he wasn't, he's basically too old for this hard work. And he helped him. And after that, he lived there for a year with Jochen in his old farm. And then I decided to have a visit there because, I mean, Tuscany is very beautiful and everything. And so I lived with Jochen and my friend David there for about 3 weeks. And then it became clear that I have to, at some point, I have to make a film with him. And it was also his idea that he said, okay, we should do it. I mean, I'm ready. I like to talk about those things. And then it was basically very easy to convince him at this point. But then 3 years later, when I decided to do it finally, it wasn't that easy anymore. He has changed. He got older and didn't have the same energy anymore. So I went there with my camera equipment, me and my brother, who helped me with recording sound, and he made camera during the interviews. And so when we arrived there, he wasn't ready. And it took one evening for us to convince him. We got drunk, basically. And that changed everything. So we were back in our in the same mood like 3 years ago. And that's basically the story how I convinced him. About opening up about those illegal things. I checked it with a lawyer, basically, and it's not a problem. So heuristically.
So it has no. I mean, that I was more asking that for if it couldn't be a problem for him, kind of, because many things he is basically saying, of course, with a big time distance, where could be still. Probably he would not tell it so openly 20 years ago or something like this.
Of course, yes, that changed. He wasn't that open about everything. But the first thing I said to him after we shoot the movie now, and then we decide what we will take out. If it's too much, we will leave it out. So we had the possibility to speak without any trouble. So he could say everything he wanted, and afterwards I asked him, is it okay to do it? So that was the deal, basically. And we didn't have a problem. He accepted the film like I edited it the first time. So, yeah.
The film reflects all his kind of life connected with his person. Did you talk to him also about the possible effects, if he was thinking about possible effects? What, for example, the drug business, he was a big part of it, causes to other people? Did he think about it, for example, in his old age, like that maybe he brought a lot of people into trouble without any direct connection, of course, without his intention, but just doing so?
I don't think so, because he took those drugs himself, and as he said it wasn't a problem to him. It helped him. That was also in one version of the film, which I cut out, where he said the LSD helped him to reach this point in his life that he can reflect it and work with his story, his own story. So I don't think so that he thought about the consequences for other people. Of course, maybe he did. I don't know, but not that much, I would say. He's also proud about of the story. That's also a point.
Yeah, the story is crazy, like sometimes like a fairy tale nearly, but yeah. You decided to shoot the film in black and white, or to turn the film probably to black and white. Can you comment maybe on this decision? Is it because we see there also archives which are probably naturally black and white, and suddenly, I mean, these 8mm footages, probably 8mm footages from 60s, etc.
So the question was why I shot it in black and white.
Yes.
That was clear from the beginning on. I mean, I knew the landscapes, and I knew that will be an important part in the movie, because somehow it also reflects his life, Jochen's life. These landscapes it's always changing. If you have ever been to Tuscany, especially in this part, you drive with the car, maybe 5 minutes later, the landscape is completely different. So it kind of reflects Jochen's changes also in his life. But he doesn't like the landscape. He hates it, he once said. When he wakes up in the morning and sees the beautiful sunrise, he hates it because it reminds him that he has to do some work. Maybe he has to go out to chop wood or whatever. So it's always somehow a bad thing. And also probably a prison for him, because he once said he will never be able to get out of there. If he goes back to Berlin, he will be in prison in about a second. And I think that's true. So it's also somehow a prison for him. And to reflect this, that was one reason to shoot it in black and white. And the other one is it's always a reduction, so to say. And if you shoot something in black and white, you lose something. So you the very beautiful landscape, if you put it in black and white, it gets somehow it looks more dangerous, which it is.
Interesting. Before we go to other questions, I am addressing the audience watching us online. If you would have a question to Daniel, you can ask two ways. Either you can write it down to Q&A downstairs. Yes, it just happens. And or you can even raise your electronic hands, and I will connect you directly. But we have here just right now a question from Martina, how did he get out of drug use? That is, if he still does not use something.
He still is using something, and that's alcohol. And he's addicted to alcohol, so he didn't stop. And I think if you once are addicted to something, it doesn't matter if it's weed or heroin or whatever, alcohol, cigarettes, you won't be able to get away with it. So he didn't stop using stuff. Sometimes he does LSD, not that often, but yeah. He stopped using heroin when he was young. So it was in his phase, as he calls it in Berlin, and he was using heroin. He once said he knew Christiane F., which I think is not true, but yeah. So, and then he stopped using heroin when he started his drug business, basically, and when he moved to Tuscany, yeah, he only drank.
So this funny scene with the waiter who he is complaining, my engine is a little bit going down, and the waiter tells him you need more petrol to feed it. It's not. It's not only a humor. In fact,
that's the truth. Yeah, that's basically the truth. And I mean, we talked a lot about drug use and alcoholism during our interviews, and I decided to put it out. It's not that important for the story, but we had to show it somehow, and that was a funny way. So I decided to put it in.
Yeah, you still it's in this dimension is also interesting, because in a general in society, let's say, using drug business, etc., is an object of condemned. It's an object of prevention, of kind of a risky way of life, which is being restricted and even criminalized. You look at your character basically with a sympathy. We see, I could say, he becomes a hero in a way, and through his amazing life. And did you think about, or what kind of reactions you get, for example, from screenings? Aren't young people inspired by your film to follow his path, because it also has a lot of freedom in it? Definitely, there are a lot of elements of freedom and not being determined by outer forces or society measures.
I think it just seems like that. I don't think that he's so free.
I don't think so. Yeah, but
some people read the film like that it's a very nice thing to sell drugs and whatever, which I think it was for some time for Jochen also. It was it was a funny part of his life, I think. But the consequences of this life, they are what they are, and he accepts it. He had this life, and that's the consequence of it. And that was also maybe a motivation to make this film. So but yes, on screenings there were, of course, younger people, but also older people who would love to have a life like this. They're jealous. And sometimes they say, okay, now I need a break from my life in office. I have to go to Jochen for a week. For a week, it's okay, I think. But if you are there for a year, especially in the winter, where it's raining all the time, there's fog from morning till night, I think it's not so nice.
So. Were you exploring, because he mentions also some his partners and women and even children. So does he have some families around in his life, and is it still somehow important to have these, or somehow to have connections with, for example, his children, or he's completely cut off everything and he lives on his own?
I think that's the most important part in his life right now. And that's his son, who lives in Berlin, who has 2 little daughters and a wife. They always come to visit him twice a year. And his daughter, she lives in Grosseto, which is the next city to the place where Jochen lives, and she's visiting once a week or every second week. And I think that's the most important part of his life, and he's also very proud of his children, that they succeed in life. And yeah, and it was a very, very beautiful moment also to meet with his daughter and talk also about her father, and and how he talks about his daughter. That was is also, I think, the heart of the film also, where he talks about this poem he wrote in prison in France. It was a Christmas letter to his daughter when he was imprisoned, and he never sent it to her. And that I was there when he gave her the letter, but the camera was out of battery, so that was kind of sad. But he gave it this letter 20 years later, so that was. I think, yeah, his children are the most important part of his life. Yeah.
You were discussing, you were mentioning this, your agreement, which gave a lot of trust to the shooting itself, but on the other hand, it gave him a lot of control potentially on the whole shape of the film. Did he use his kind of right to let's say, to tell you, okay, we have agreed, if I am against something, you will cut it off?
Yeah.
Did it happen somehow?
Not at all. Not at all.
Ah,
the first scene where I'm using my camera lens, which opened, he wasn't that happy with that. He didn't like the shape of the lens, but that's it. The rest of the film, he once said, "Yeah, I can agree with this. This is Jochen." So, and that was the happiest moment for me as a filmmaker, where my protagonist said, "Okay, you painted a picture of myself which I can live with." And it was very, very, very beautiful situation. I was at his house to show him his film. I drove to Tuscany, and he laughed a lot about himself, and that was very beautiful to me also.
Once we are talking about this kind of reception, were there also some screenings, for example, in his neighborhood, that suddenly people who probably doesn't know so much about him and perceive him only without this context of his crazy life, does it have some effects also on his life in the community?
I'm not sure. I think I mean the community is very tiny. There live about 100 people in this little village, and everyone knows him. Everyone knows his stories.
Okay.
So it won't be something new for them. They know that's the guy from Germany who was a drug trader and whatever, and now lives there. And they know the daughter. They went to school there. So it's a very tiny community. So it won't change anything. But we are planning to do it. Now with the coronavirus, it's a little, it's difficult, because I would like to also be there when he shows it to his friends also. And that will happen, yeah. A friend of his has a nice garden with, where we can show it.
I'm addressing again the viewers. You can we have a debate with Daniel Film on his film Jochen. You can still ask. We have still a few minutes, so you can still ask the question either through Q&A application, as we had this before, or directly. You can raise your hand, and I can invite you to speak your question directly, just to remind for this option. Maybe before it happens, I would still ask, you said that it took 3 years before you basically somehow took the decision and also tuned him up to the shooting, and then the shooting itself, it seems it might be relatively short, like maybe 1 year or something like that. Can you reflect on this?
So the first question was why I waited for 3 years.
No. That you have already said that you were basically thinking about it, and then you decided, and then from the decision, how long it took to make the film?
The decision, it was in February 2018, where I said, okay, now I have to make this film. And then I wrote an exposé, and I prepared it, everything technically. I spoke also with my professor about it, and I'm still a student. And so it took half a year, the preparation, because Jochen wasn't ready at this point in the winter. He was basically not in the mood to make a movie. So I waited until summer, and I was there for about 12 days to shoot everything.
You were working a lot alone, but with a small crew, probably of your generation. What is it like to see this kind of witness of very different time than we live in, or your generation lives in? Is because your film by itself also creates kind of intergeneration bridge. Do you see some kind of similar questions or desires within your generation, what he went through, or do you see some big differences in circumstances, etc.?
Yes, I think our generation is very nostalgic, and many people would prefer to live maybe in New York in the 70s. That's this idea, or in Berlin in the 90s. And so yes, there's a big desire for those stories, and they are not, it seems that they are harder to reach these days, to have an adventure. And so yes, that's, I think, the part of my generation that we want to have it like that. We want the good music of those days and so on. I hear it a lot if I'm talking with people. So it's a very nostalgic generation. I don't think that's a good thing, but that's the case. Yeah,
it's interesting because nostalgia always comes from, it's like emotion of something is unreachably missing, and where does it come from? Like today, when we live in this probably most saturated time of all times in general and statistically, etc., in terms of, for example, I don't know, material things, probably the mankind, or at least in Europe, majority of people never have lived in such a kind of secured life.
I mean, first of all, I think it's going to change with COVID.
It seems it's obvious.
That's the first crisis our generation has to face. So, but where does it come from was the question. I think we are just recycling stuff from the culture. There's not really something new. And it's the only difference, it got digital. That's basically it. And that's not that interesting maybe for people.
What is your referential sources? You say you are studying yet. What are your referential sources in cinema, in literature, or in life, which gives you kind of direction, what is valuable and what makes sense to do?
I don't really understand the question, sorry.
If you are studying cinema and at the same time you are speaking about this nostalgia, etc., do you see some figures, some, for example, filmmakers in the past, which brings you inspiration for your own filmmaking, or some authors of novels or people coming from literature? What is your referential kind of background? It's a very wide question, but maybe...
and I'm not sure how to answer it. I mean, there are many things that I read and saw in the last 10 years working or trying to work with cinema, and it's kind of, I don't know where it comes from. It was too much maybe. So maybe if I shooted something like that, maybe it could be a reference to whatever, Stanley Kubrick, I don't know. It could be, but I'm not sure anymore because there's maybe too much. So, but sure, I'm as everyone else, we are all influenced by many people.
And documentary is. Are you going to orient more like you are more on documentary track, or do you see also like fiction as a?
Yeah. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I will work with the documentary film. I think I'm not ready to make something fictional, and I think it's more interesting to me. It's more direct. So if I can tell something with a real person, I would prefer that than to writing something and imagining it and then producing it. So it's I think it's more, to me, more interesting to work with reality, which of course a fictional film can also do, but with real people, let's say it's like this.
Yeah.
And altering it and forming a story out of reality.
In documentary, casting is absolutely crucial, even more than in fiction, because if you find a good character, then you can have strong film without even creating a story, because the story, it reveals itself. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, we are coming to the point, plus minus, where we should end. Maybe there are still some ideas which we didn't go through in this debate, and you are thinking about it when still coming back to your films. Is it something which still we didn't address, and maybe you can feel important to share with audience or potential audience of your film?
I'm not prepared for this question, to be honest.
Oh, okay. I was just trying if something is not prepared. Yeah. Okay. So in this case, I'll thank you for sharing your thoughts. I think it's valuable for people who see your film to have these background ideas, and at least this is one of little advantages of online version, that they will present these things together as a film, and the debate, not only for those who enter the cinema hall, but also for people who can see it later.
Could be very nice for the future, so to have this combination of online and real life.
Exactly. Exactly. That's interesting. Okay. Thank you. I wish you good luck and health in this crazy time, and
and thank you very much for having me, and
yeah. Goodbye.
Goodbye.